Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the podcast. This is Life in the Peloton. I'm Mitch Docker, and the podcast is being brought to you by our proud partners, Rapha. I love speaking about Rapha. I'm really excited about working with them in the podcast, also on the bike as well. But the RCC, the Rapha Cycling Club, is an amazing part of Rapha that I love chatting about too and experiencing now on the bike as a non-pro. The Rapha Cycling Club is an active cycling community of members who share Rapha's love of riding. It's made up of chapters based out of the clubhouses all around the world. They have regular group rides each week or multiple times a week, depending on which city and which clubhouse that you're in or you're visited. Where if you live in that city, you have a group to catch up with and ride with each week. It's a great little community that you can just catch up with. You know there's going to be a ride. You go and do your loop. It's all different speeds, all different levels. Like I said, depending on which city and which clubhouse you're in. But the best thing about it is, if you're an RCC member and you're traveling around the world to different cities, you just head across and check out the different RCC rides that are happening in that city. You get to be taken out and explore the area with ride leaders and that community and learn where to ride with from them. Another great part of it is too, you don't even have to go with your bike. The RCC clubhouses have bikes for you to hire. The RCC, it's a great part of Rapha. They're not just about producing that amazing cycling clothing. It's the cycling club as well. It's all for the love of riding. That's why I love having Rapha as a partner on the podcast, because that's what we're trying to do here in Life in the Peloton, is tell you about this great sport of cycling. Now to the episode, a great episode we've got for you this week. It is talking with a good friend of mine now, Scott Barrow. He is a performance coach, work, life or sport, helping people get the best out of themselves and their situations. He can make you go from feeling stuck to making the magic happen. That's exactly what was happening with me back in 2017 when I was a professional. I came to this point where I was moving on from Orica Green Edge, and I didn't know if that was going to be the end of my career or what was going to happen. I was stuck. Coincidentally, at this time, our paths crossed, and it was an amazing chance for me to explore what was going on in my mind. And it was an amazing chance for me, with his help, to explore what was going on and ultimately prolong my career for another 4 years when I moved into EF education. I'm not going to go too much more into the story because that's what we're going to do in this podcast. Scott and I get to explore what happened with me back in 2017, how he was able to help me realize what I needed from my career as a pro cyclist. But the best thing about Scott is it's not just about sport as well. He explores that same idea with people in their normal workspace and life in general. That's what we're talking about today. Life behind the mirror lenses. What's going on in these professional cyclist minds, professional sporting minds, and everyone's ticking clock up there. It was really interesting for me, and actually something that I do naturally when I'm doing the podcast, and that's something he realized in me as well. People ask me, what are the things that I've taken over from my pro life, aside from my riding legs, of course, and it's athletic greens. I was using AG1 when I was racing overseas. As a pro, it was all about performance, the elite stuff. And even though I was using athletic greens when I was racing, I feel like now when time is a little bit more precious, it's really my go-to. It's an all-in-one, packed full of vitamins and minerals. It's got superfood complexes, probiotics, plant extracts, antioxidants, enzyme and mushroom complex. It's all there. I like to start every day with AG1. I have one small scoop mixed with water. I like to put a bit of ice in it, shake it up, ready to go. I have it first thing in the morning. It's just the perfect way to start the day for me. I often have a quick coffee and hit the road on an early ride. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, the Athletic Greens is giving you a 1 free year supply of vitamin D plus 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. I can't recommend it enough, guys. Go across and check it out. athleticgreens.com/lifeinthepeloton. That's athleticgreens.com/lifeinthepeloton. Now, guys, this is a bit of a different episode to the last few episodes we've had. They've been big episodes. The Cape Epic episode 2 weeks ago. Of course, what is mountain biking before that? Now a change in tact, but all the same feel. Let's get off the bike and let's understand what is going on in our heads as pro cyclists, but also just as normal human beings. Guys, sit back and enjoy this one. I bring you Scott Barrow. Well, Scott, we've finally caught up. We're out near where you are living these days, out in the country here. We're sitting in the Life in the Peloton recording studio, the moving recording studio. Mate, it's great to have you on the pod finally after we worked together sort of probably about 5 or 6 years ago now, wasn't it?
Well, I remember Norway, the Worlds, 2017.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's awesome. For so long, we'd had a lot to do with each other, but never in person. So here it is. It's a bit weird, isn't it? And great at the same time.
Well, I've just sort of got you on the mic as well, and rather than just catching up, I'm like, I can have a chat to you as well and record it.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Well, before we get going and start talking about a few things, I want you to sort of set the scene for everyone and explain, who you are and what do you do.
So my name's Scott Barrow. I live in Warrandyte, so I'm in the outskirts of Melbourne. I got a family, 3 kids, some dogs, wife, all that. I've been working in sport and coaching and performance my whole working career. The first part of my career, for about 15 or so years, it was very much hands-on with athletes. So a lot of the sports science and physical preparation and conditioning and all that sort of thing. And then about midway after that period, then I shifted and I got trained in a different form of coaching. And it's known as professional coaching. It's just a label it's given. But that's the type of coaching that people use for leaders, leadership coaching, performance coaching in organisations, coaching to really help people ramp up their learning so they can get outcomes that they mightn't otherwise get. So for people who are sort of maybe feeling stuck and they need to go that next level, that's sort of the work I do.
We're talking about mental coaching, isn't it?
Yeah. The first part of my career was physical coaching, if you like, in simple terms, and then I shifted into sort of essentially mental coaching. Yeah, so helping people work out what they want, how they're going to go about it, and then it's an ongoing sort of relationship, navigating the ups and downs of all that.
And what sort of people are we talking about? Clearly I was a sportsman, but that it's not specific only to sports people, is it?
Yeah. I love working in sport. I do work with athletes and some coaches as well, but in particular, as additional to that, I work with business owners, usually small business owners, sort of the people who have to do it all themselves, and some executives. And so I can imagine now perhaps people might be listening and go, well, yeah, but what the hell is he talking about? Well, look, the topic that you work with people on are quite varied, because it's not about me going, I know exactly what you need to do. I'm not taking like a subject matter expert approach. It's more helping them work through a process. And so I've worked with world winning hairdressers. I've worked with cabinet ministers in Indonesia. I've worked with business owners and executives. It's really wide and varied. So it's almost like a generalist performance coaching approach. Does that make sense, or am I? Well, I'm rambling a little bit.
Let's go back to the beginning then. How did it really start for you, and how did you realise that you had this, I guess you could call it talent, this ability to, or I guess the want maybe as well? Where did it all sort of formulate from, and how did you transition into this?
Yeah, I think I grew up with 2 parents who are very sort of conscious of sort of teaching and helping and supporting my own learning, and then I actually started coaching my local baseball team when I was 16. I was coaching the under-14s when I was 16. So I kept it going in the background while I was playing my own sport. And then I just liked working with people and helping people. Like I said, the first major part of my career was in the physical preparation with high-performance athletes, with AFL, Olympic level athletes, medalists, right down to developmental athletes as well. And then the key thing, I think, for now, and the work that we did together, after that time, I'd been exposed to using some methods which help people learn not just about like how to do a skill or how to hit a ball, but also how to get more out of themselves, whatever the area. And that was really interesting to me. And then I was able to discover that there's a way of learning and training and qualifying yourself so that you can help people in a skillful way.
In all this, in the beginning, were you learning, like as you said, you were learning to help other people? I guess right from the beginning,
there's a bit of a kickback that you were like, it was fulfilling for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love helping people, but then some of the thing that motivates me is I'm interested in the craft of this coaching work. So it's like that's my version in some ways of performance. So I'm here to help you, and I'm continually checking in with what's going to be most helpful for you. I've got some tools and some ways, so I'm doing that. But at the same time, I'm very interested in the craft of how good I can be to help you, if that makes sense. So that is a motivating factor. If you're not interested in that part of it, your own craft of how you work, then I think after a while the interest of it dries up.
When we say helping, and you've said it a few times now, how do you actually help? What are the nuts and bolts? If we can just talk about it quickly, because we're going to get into my story after this, and we can unpack it a bit more. But just in general, how do you help people?
People usually come to me when they're not satisfied, one way or another. Either they're not getting results, or they're getting the results that's coming too much of a cost, or they've got an upcoming challenge or an opportunity that they're wondering how they're going to do it, or they've got pressure from a time point of view or an energy point of view, or like say in your case, you had to get results, you had to be at a certain level, you had to make sure of that, so there's a degree of accountability and pressure. So they come to me when they're not quite satisfied, and then they're thinking, well, the way I've done it, or what I've got around me, or it might not get the job done to their satisfaction. So they come to me then what we do, we work out, well, what do you want? What do you want here? And what does it look like? What does that look like? And how do we know when we get there? And so you sort of, there's a bit of goal setting, there's a bit of vision, but also matching that up with who are you as a person, what's important to you, and how do we sort of bring all that together? So you've got your endpoints, where you're at right now, where you want to be, or who you want to be, or how you want to be, and then how we get there, and what are the steps along the way.
Well, let's talk now about our relationship in the beginning, and I guess really, how we met. As far as I remember, you contacted me and said, "Hey, look, I'm listening to the podcast. Shout out to the Life in the Peloton podcast now." But it was something you picked up in my language, I think you said, and the way I was questioning other athletes or other people who were on the podcast, and that inquisitiveness I had about their psyche or their mentality. And you said, is this something you're interested in? And that was sort of this reach out. It was at a really pinnacle time in my career, because at that moment, whether I'd known it or not, I realised I wasn't going to be riding with Green Edge anymore. I think I hadn't been offered a contract. I knew I was going to have to move on. And I was at this sort of crux in my career where I had to learn how to get results again. I had to show myself. At that point, I'd been a pro for about 8 years. I'd been doing a job, in my eyes, very successfully, a job to put sprinters in the position, help classics men in their role, domestique role, or lead out men, as we call it. And all of a sudden, I was faced with this task of, okay, now it's time for me to get results. As simple as that sounds, I couldn't do it. I couldn't go that step forward. In a lead out, in a sprint scenario, was I would get the sprinter to 200 metres to go. Suddenly doing that final 200 metres myself, whenever I got the opportunity in that final year with Green Edge, I couldn't make the final step. There was a mental block. And coincidentally, it was this time that you were sort of reaching out. And I don't know why you were reaching out and what angle you saw, but it just came at a perfect time for me that was the help that I needed. I didn't realise it at the time, but as we started to work together, we started to unpack that. Can you remember those moments and how it sort of formulated for you?
Yeah, I definitely can remember it. At that point in time, I didn't know that you might have been in the position where you're transitioning from pure domestique to needing to show yourself more, because maybe you had a sense that contract was finishing up. But I definitely heard you when you were interviewing these people. I heard just a genuine curiosity as a person, and you're asking questions and you're doing interviews. But I also felt like I was listening to someone who was looking for answers, or looking for answers. And so I just thought, you know what, I feel like I might be able to help this bloke. And it's pretty weird. You didn't know me, I didn't know you, and here I am contacting you out of the blue. I had to pester you a little bit to try and prove that I was legitimate rather than just a pesky fanboy. But I remember I said, listen, I've just picked up some things around, your own performance and avenues or trying to find ways that you might be able to improve and go to that next level or change your riding. And the reason why I picked these up, because this is the work I do, and therefore would you be interested in having a chat about what we might be able to do together? So that, that's coming out of the blue from a stranger, and good on you. You sort of, you said yes. At least you were open to having a chat, and that was where I was coming from.
Well, I think it was just, like I said before, it was just at that perfect timing where, I've been a big believer of throughout my whole career to build your own team around you, whether that was a strength trainer or whether that was mentors or, your own personal coach. And you were another piece to that puzzle, I felt. Something that I feel like is very much underrated in all the sporting industry, but I can only speak for cycling, is the mental power, the psychological side of an athlete. We sharpen the tool so much with our physical performance and deem that as the most important thing. Don't know what the percentage would be, but I almost feel like we need to go 50-50 with the mind as well. So at this time, it was very important for me to reinvent myself almost. And it is a common thing with athletes, cyclists, is that they fall into a niche that they're good at. Lead out man, domestiques, on a climb, whatever. There's only a few guys that are the pure winners. They need that support around them. And once that niche dries up or there's no need for it anymore, the team deems that, suddenly it's like, well, I've got to quickly adapt, change myself, go back to what I used to be able to do.
Yeah.
If you can't mentally do that, and I mean like find the confidence or, I don't know, what is that? Why do we become blocked? Why was I blocked at that time?
Yeah, I think, like you say, you've been sort of so in that role and like you said, doing it what you perceive to be well. And I remember a comment you made. You said, teams will say, just do the team thing, do what we need you to do. This is your role, Mitch, do. And then when it comes to contract time, it's like, where are your result? So, I think it's a focus point, because at that point, like, why do you pigeonhole yourself? Because you have defined your role and you've become really good at it. And so maybe overall your objective is to be really good at that role. But if you're playing a bigger game, you're saying, if right from the start you're saying, I'm going to play this domestique role, I'm going to do it, but I'm also going to keep one eye on those opportunities when it's my time to have a crack. But not many young riders would have that maturity or confidence to hold that attitude, I imagine. You know what I mean? They might be going, oh, what if people think I'm, saving a bit for myself, for example?
It's a slippery slope. Exactly. You pointed out a really good point. As you come in, you're just happy to be accepted in the team. You're happy to make that step and you're ready to take direction from the team. You're not thinking, you've got the confidence in the team. You're not thinking, I need to watch out for my own back at this point.
Yeah.
But actually, that's something you need to be always doing.
Yeah, and I think in the career of professional cycling, that's the game within the game. Yeah, you need to be good in races and all that, but you also got to be managing your own career and go, okay, if I just do this and that dries up for whatever reason, where does that leave me? You know what I mean? Or you get to, say, you're 33 years of age and they're looking at a 23-year-old guy and they go, well, this guy's going to be half the money and we reckon he can pretty much do that same role anyway, even though you're so experienced and so good at it. Yeah, I think you need to be playing the game of performing well, but then you've got to be going, so a bit further back strategically and going, well, where does this leave me? And what other options do I need to make sure stay open for when I need to shift, if I do need to shift?
When you remember us talking in the beginning, and I guess in general now, when you're starting with a new client, how do you start up the conversation, and how do you sort of work through this process? Is it asking these questions, or you've got the oversight of the knowledge and you're helping pointing in direction? What does the process look like? And if you can remember my process, how did we start working through things? Yeah,
so let's just go to your process maybe, because it might be better. We agreed that we wanted to work together. And so I still remember the first session. The first session essentially was like, so what do you want here? What might I be able to help you with here? Essentially, you were saying two things, what I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I remember. You said, well, I want to be able to win a race. And then you said, but if I get to the end of my career and I haven't been able to do that, I want to know that I got the most out of myself. So they were the two things I was in. So one was quite tangible, and then the other one, getting the most, because I understand in cycling you can do everything right and still not win a race. It's a superficial evaluation to say, oh, that person win races, so they're a good rider, and that person hasn't won a race, so they're not a good rider. I get that. So yeah, that's the starting point. What are we trying to do here? There's two ways I can go from there, and then I can sort of take the reins and go, so what do you think, where do we start within that project? Or I might ask the client, say, well, how do you normally like to start on projects that are important to you? So as much as possible, I'm trying to keep the ball in the client's court to help them tap into their own resourcefulness and stuff that they often already know how to do, but that it might be just a bit covered up to them in that moment.
And I remember identifying those two goals, and it's very true, and it still rings true to me now. And it's been something that I do believe in is goal setting and having that tangible goal, but not being, and maybe this sounds a bit of a cop-out, but not being completely fixated on that as a success or not a success.
Yeah.
Because I love what you do on the way to achieving that goal.
Yeah.
And for me, at the end of all that, of course you want to achieve that goal, but what comes out of trying to achieve that goal, for me, is almost more interesting than what you achieving it. That is just the nice little cherry on top.
Yep.
But the beautiful big cake underneath is what you've created, because you've set yourself on this path that you would have never have gone on. And that's what happened with us.
Yep.
I feel like you got me on the road. You asked the right questions at that time for me to set this tangible goal. But what I achieved on the way to that prolonged my career for another 4 years after that, and made me into a new rider, where I went on to my new team, EF, as a reborn rider in a way, psychologically. Physically, I think you pushed the limits of me too, but I think they were always there. It was just more opening up the gates again, that belief.
Yeah. And I imagine too, I'm going to assume here, but that racing became more interesting to you again. It became more like, not refreshing, sort of interesting, and more seeing race as an opportunity rather than I've just got to do my job and make sure I get the result that I need to do. Is that a fair call?
Yeah, and I think very much along the way, looking back on it now, of course you have that idea that, you try and take the easy way out. But in the moment, it feels so important what you're doing, and it has to feel like that. But actually, once you take yourself out of the bubble, you realise you're just doing your job enough to get through the race. We're at the end of the day, we're clever human beings, aren't we? And we're not going to hurt ourselves more than we have to. And that was sort of the mentality that you have as a domestique. You just want to find the way that you are going to be appreciated just as much by the team. But of course, it's the easiest possible way to do that.
Yeah, and then the piece that's missing in that way of thinking is the fulfillment for yourself. Because like, you're doing your job, people are saying well done and thank you for that, Mitch, but at the same time you're like, it's not really setting my world on fire. And that's not to dismiss the importance of doing those roles, but it's like, but it probably needs to be a little bit more than that for me. More
pressure, maybe.
Right.
But that's the thing. The question:
asking more of yourself, wanting more for yourself.
What is pressure? What is this? This analogy of, like, you see this at the World Cups just been on. You see these guys who can kick within a 30-centimetre box in the top of a goal, and when it comes to the penalty shootout, they can miss the whole goal. How can this be possible? Is this mental? What is this mental pressure that these guys are feeling?
Well, I think in that case, it's really simple. It's what if I miss? And so your attention goes into what if I miss, and all the backstory that's involved in that. What my wife say, what will people think, all the people have helped me, all the whole, it's almost like, when, in movies when they represent someone about to die and their whole world, flashes before them. It's that sort of thing. So their attention is on the things that they don't want to happen, but they know that they don't want that. So that creates that tension, as opposed to keeping your attention on what you're there to do. Not the outcome, but all right, I just need to run in and kick this ball, and I know where I'm going to go with it. Attentional control is a key skill of high performance. Attentional control. When I say that, it's like noticing where your attention is and then bringing it back to where you want it to be. And we did that with you, and about where's my attention and where do I want it to be based on what I want to do and what you said you wanted to do, what we arrived at. Sorry to put words in your mouth, but you said your focus point, which was going to take care of the most, which was to race freely. And part of what I was hearing when I was working with you was noticing, you were saying, noticing my attention was there, and then I'd just bring it back to here, what can I do to race freely right now? Which is trusting your instincts and reading the play and using your experience that you've got.
It's exactly right, and it's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because it was one thing I remember when I thought I had to focus on that end result. Yeah. Okay, I want to click in, kilometre 1, I'm going to try and finish top 10 today. I'm going to try and win today. Yeah. All of a sudden, the race is super hard in the first 20, 30 kilometres.
Puts that goal at risk, doesn't it? It's like, how am I going to... I'm not confident I can do this right now.
I'm overwhelmed. What's going on? My legs
if this is how hard it's going to be, how the hell am I going to get to top 10 or win the race?
And what you were able to do with me was focus on the task at hand. Task at hand was following that wheel in front. We broke it down. I remember even breaking it down to the most ridiculous, pedal stroke by pedal stroke. Okay, it sounds ridiculous, but actually when I was becoming overwhelmed, and I just went, you know what, let's just focus on the next 1 kilometre. Hang on, let's just focus on this next little rise here. Let's just focus on the next 10 seconds. And it's a technique that I've taken on, and I've sort of morphed it. When I came into Grand Tours, it would be like, I'm hurting so much on this climb, all I need to do is count down from 10 and just hang on for 10 more seconds.
Yeah. And then that feeling has shifted, that concern might have just softened a bit.
And the 20K climb was much too long to handle. It'd be overwhelming.
Yeah.
But if I hang on 10 more seconds, I could deal with the next 10 in 10 more.
Yeah.
Sounds ridiculous, but this little trick was, well, a trick. It was just having that control again, other than just losing control.
Yeah, and that's part of high performance and a mindset that works for high performance. And that little, what you said, a little trick, people go, there's nothing sexy about it. And there's a discipline in the practicing of it to be able to do it and keep doing it and go, you know what, this is my way forward. There's no magic bullets I can sort of rely on here. It's just this. And that's like part of the learning to recognise this thing works. There's nothing sexier. There's no magic bullet. And yeah, I'm happy to do it. And that works for me.
Hey guys, a quick break from the episode to chat about beer. Oh yeah, of course, beer. Bridge Road Brewery, a grassroots independent brewery from the historical country Victorian town of Beechworth. Established in 2005, 18 years ago, with strong values and the importance of independence, authenticity and quality. The best thing about Bridge Road Brewery is they love cycling. And they've got their own cycling event. Can you believe that? Beer and cycling. What a dream. I love these guys. It's called the Beechworth Granite Classic. It's showcasing some of Victorian high country's most picturesque gravel back roads. One of the great things is it's a podium-free affair. It's not a race in its traditional sense, but you just go as hard as you want. It's a great combination of going hard, great gravel roads, but of course a great vibe. It's my favourite gravel event. I did it last year. Honestly, I said to everyone after the event, I loved it. It was just a perfect combination. It's a whole weekend of events. Friday night, there's a social shakeout, a 90-minute no-drop loop, checking out around Beechworth with a few coldies afterwards, of course. There's a handmade bike show on Friday night as well. Saturday is the Granite Classic. That's got varied distances, so you can just choose what suits you. Saturday night is the dinner for the Granite legends, and Sunday is the recovery ride to roll out some of those beers from the night before. But the best thing of all is the Life in the Peloton beer. Bridge Road and Life in the Peloton have come together to make the very first Life in the Peloton beer. You can hear it in my voice. It's happening. I can't believe it. Finally, me banging on about beer all these years, and we've finally done it. We have got the first Life in the Peloton beer. It's going to be dropping at the Granite Classic in a couple weeks' time. If you haven't registered, it's the 29th of April. You've got a couple of weeks. Of course, you need to live in Australia. Well, you could fly out from overseas if you're that keen. Get across here because you're going to want to get one of these beers. You're going to be able to order them online, but they're going to go quickly. I will tell you a little bit more about them as it comes up. It's a regional Australian ale with a hint of Belgium, of course. Guys, let's get back to the episode.
Let's talk a little bit about the way the brain sort of works. Not that I know anything about this, but this is something that you were able to determine with me, and I was able to sort of flag something with you. Is this, I call it this sort of the chimp reaction. I've taken that from another book that I read. This sort of emotional reaction that I was having in races and continually have as a normal person. It's this immediate reaction without thinking. You've already said it before you want to, and it's out there. You're like, all right, that's just this real emotional reaction. And we nicknamed it the Mitch bark, which was quite a funny thing because it was like me barking like a dog. It was like when I was in the heat of the moment in a race and I would receive something I didn't like, whether it was a bottle from a car I didn't want or someone, was talking to me at that moment I didn't like it, and I would just, blow up. Exactly. Yeah. And in the position I had in the Peloton, in the team, it was a leader, and I need to portray a bit of leadership, and guys couldn't see me doing that. It wasn't that I had to suppress it, it was more that I had to be aware of when it was coming and really more acknowledge what had just happened when it did happen, and be like, cool, that just happened. Next time I might catch it slightly earlier. And eventually I would have some kind of control on what was going on and realize, wow, that normally would send off this reaction. And now I'm aware of that, and now I can deter it a different way.
Yep.
What's going on with this in our minds? What is causing this? Because I know a lot of people out there are listening going, oh, yeah. Well, I think it just happens with everyone, doesn't it?
I think at that stage, it's almost like a defense mechanism. It's like something's building up and you just want to expel it and get rid of it. And the skill becomes, like you said, noticing it earlier, practicing that. It's like a version of mindfulness. You're being mindful about what you're experiencing, what you're feeling in the moment, and then you've got a little bit more choice about how you deal with it. Like say, the duck shakes its feathers or the wings off in the pond. You can sort of expel that pressure, that frustration, that emotion a little bit better especially in the context of the leadership role. So I don't want to go into too much because I think I might be a bit irresponsible if I could talk a bit much more than that. But ultimately, it's almost like it's like the pure animalistic instincts of you. Something I don't like, get rid of it, and then I move on. But in the jungle, that's fine for survival. But when you're trying to lead a team to do meaningful performance, we need to be a bit more skillful.
Is that something that you have to sort of acknowledge with different clients on all levels, whether it's sportsmen, whether it's businessmen or whatever? Is this something that is, is it ego? Is it something that's damaging our ego? Is it something that, we don't like it. So our reaction is just sort of, you can't say that in a professional environment, let alone in a non-professional environment, in your home, it's... Yeah,
so it is something I work on with people. So it's like, I notice in these, for example, we'll distill it down to the client might say something like, okay, so I'm noticing in these sort of situations, I feel these things and this is my reaction to it. And then it's like, okay, so what are you noticing? So you become more aware of what you're picking up in your body, in your mind, in your self-talk. And then, okay, well, what would be a way that would work better for you and the team that you're leading? So it is versions of that definitely is a factor, because ultimately it's about, like you say, keeping it, rather than being overwhelmed, putting your attention back onto what you need to do that's going to be most helpful. You know what I mean? It's as simple as that, really.
With the young guys coming into the Peloton now, I feel like, this is something that I went through, but of course, I've forgotten about it now. When you first come into the Peloton, we spoke about it in the beginning, these guys that have this trust in the team and they come in, they've got all these great ideas, and actually it's hard. I'm not going to say for everyone, but it is quite hard. Your ego takes a bit of a kicking in, your morale, you go to a race, you get dropped, pull out, you go to the next race, you puncture, pull out again, the next race is cold and wet, you get dropped, you pull out, all of a sudden you're going in this downward spiral. What are these guys feeling? And to turn this stuff around, why was, say for instance me as an example, and we weren't working together back then when I was a young guy, you can only speculate, but is this something that to pull yourself out of this, to turn your mentality around, to get your motivation back, because it is very night or day. You don't get this back, you're out of the Peloton in 2 years. You find, and no one's really there to help you. In the cycling world, it's like, wow, that guy, I don't know what happened to him, he's out, bugger him. Opposed to actually addressing him and going, hey, what's going on? Let's help this guy through. So I guess the question I've got to ask is, the young guys that make it through this, what is it if they're not getting help from someone like yourself or someone else out there? What is this? Is this something that the way they're being brought up? Is this a genetic trait with guys? Is this, am I just a hard bastard that got through it? Or have I actually picked up techniques along the way from different people I've learned? Or is this something I've just been born with?
Yeah, I mean, that's that nature and nurture argument, and there's a case for both. But what I hear and what you're saying is that if someone's stepping into a new environment and all of a sudden it's like all on and nothing seems to be working, their normal ways of doing things and getting things done and being successful are not working for whatever reason, then it's the ability to quickly recognise that, accept that, and then be able to have a different way of going about it and being able to sort of practice it so it becomes heat-proof under the hottest environments and the high-pressure environments. So I think it's that ability to quickly it's like your rate of learning in some ways, and that's why people use people like me. Anyone can reach goals by themselves, but what a coach does, or what someone in my position helps people do, it saves them time and energy and even money. So you're basically accelerating that learning process and enriching it. But yeah, I think definitely for those people who come in, they've got a background, so they come in and that's what they know. Their background is what they know, their whole life experience at that point. They come in and all of a sudden it's a new Wild West environment. It's like, Jesus Christ, it's on here. The quicker they're able to learn that way that they've got might not be working or going to work for them, and the quicker they can make changes. So sometimes it takes a while to even recognise what they're doing that's not working. Sometimes they're not even aware of what they're doing is not working.
And they keep doing the wrong thing over and over again.
Yeah, that's right. The better performers are agile and adaptable, and they're really good learners. And that's where support people can come in, because it's hard to do all the learning you need to do in your life or in your career by yourself. Like you said, you surrounded yourself with support people who had expertise. But part of it is also, in this case, is like helping people, athletes, become aware of, what have I been doing? What's been working? What's not working? And therefore, like just having that step back to see what you're actually doing. And I can imagine in pro cycling, a lot of it, you got the DS, you got some coaches there now, but it's still pretty. You got to handle yourself, don't you? A lot of it, you got to manage yourself in a lot of ways.
Very true, and that's why I try and preach it out to a lot of young guys who are just going across there or have been across there for a few years. The team is great, and this is definitely not slinging on any of the teams I've been on. But at the end of the day, it's your career.
Yes.
The team moves on whether you're with them or not.
Yep.
But you build your own team around you, they're going to follow you wherever you go. And their main priority is Mitch Stocker or whoever it might be. That's their team. They're the ones, that's your own squad. And they're going to move from Skill Shimano to Green Edge to EF.
Yes.
That's still going to be,
yes.
And their main priority is to make you succeed. These teams is to make the team succeed.
Yes, exactly. They want to use you as not as a pawn, I don't want to use that term, but they want to use you as a component that contribute to their objectives. And that's good for the team. And like you say, but it might not always be as good for you, for your own opportunities and development. So it's a fine balance. And that goes back to what you said at the start. If I put all my trust in the team, I'm a young rider and I put all my trust in the team, and I've been doing this domestique role, so like I've done it bloody well for many years, and all of a sudden they say, yeah, thanks Mitch, it's been good. And like, what the I've been doing this. So you need to, just as you need to have a team around you, you need to also own the way you view your career as a professional athlete and go, all right, this is the domestique role, but I know if I just do that might be a dead end in time. I've got to in my mind at least keep those ideas of other ways of racing. I've got to keep them alive or keep them at the ready. So that's the ownership of your own career and your own performance, rather than handing over the responsibility to the DS, the team.
What are the crossovers here? We're talking mainly about cycling here, and it's really interesting to hear and unpack a little bit of what's happening in teams. And, but I feel like there's a general crossover here, because I feel like cycling's not that exclusive that it doesn't apply to the rest of the world and whatever we're doing. I think we're just talking pretty in general here, because a lot of the tools I learnt with you and a lot of the tools I've learnt throughout my whole cycling life, I'm applying right now as a retired rider. The stuff that you talked about with me, and I'm assuming, the other people and the other different industries you've worked with, it all crosses over. Is that true?
Yeah, definitely. Because ultimately it's about people want to do things in their life, in their world, and sometimes their previous ways don't work or not likely to work in these upcoming situations. So it's like, how best do I do that? And in more heightened environment where the stakes are sort of higher, if you like, high performance sport, business with big budgets or tight time frames or high loads, then we look at what can help us either do this process better or even easier, because sometimes there's an efficiency requirement as well, because it's like, it's no good me getting all these results and just being trashed at the end of it. So I think definitely there's a crossover. And my work, because it's not sports psychology, although it goes into those areas when the client goes there, I don't teach directly teach mental skills or anything like that, but my work definitely helps people simply go from where they're at to where they want to be at and navigating that. So the crossover's there for sure.
Well, I was speaking about the end result. When you think about our end result, I've got an idea of what I saw as a success, and the end result for me from your perspective, the process that we worked through and your analysis of what happened, what was the development and what was the end result that you saw we came to?
You start off saying, I want to win a race, but at the very least, I want to know I've got the best out of myself. And so the race was there. And then towards the end of the season, you had a few performances. I went, was it the Quebec race or was it Montreal or one of those? Yeah. Yeah, you went off the front to mow someone down at the front. You could have sat, you could have sat in for the sprint and got 12th, but you went off the front to reel in Rigo, wasn't it, I think? So that, and you said to me that you surprised yourself. And so at that point, I was sort of hearing someone who was breaking free of the shackles of previous identity of a certain way of racing, like the domestique, and actually trying some things, taking risks, recognising that was a part of what was required to get a result for yourself, was risk-taking rather than the safety of knowing, I've just got to get this guy to the 200-metre mark as the leader. So I was hearing that. And then at the very end, you said to me in correspondence, I reached my goal. And I'm like, but you said you wanted to try and win a race and you hadn't won a race. You got close, you got a 4th and a 5th and whatever else. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, okay, well, something else was going on. And the way I interpreted it was that I just thought someone who doesn't want to feel prematurely trapped in an identity or a way, they want to know that if they wanted to take it further and get a win, they could do it. And then finally, I wondered for you was that you had a sniff of that, you started getting into that, you started trying to get some results for yourself. I think at that point, once you sort of knew that it was possible, you think, I don't think I care enough about this. I don't think getting the absolute result is that important for me. And I don't say that as a criticism. It's more just like, I know I can do it if I really want to. I know I can now, whereas before I don't know if I did know.
It was exactly that. I'd lost the belief. I had succumbed to, my career was potentially over in 2017. The end of this year, and what I think what I was able to do during our process was relieve that of fear of my career could be over to just enjoying the final 6 months of my career. Yeah. And racing and doing what I wanted to do. And Quebec is late in the season. And that moment that you're talking about, we came out of the last corner, Rigoberto Urán had attacked.
You've been up the footpath a few hundred metres before. I was very impressed with that. It's pretty heroic.
He attacked, and Rigo wins. He's won Montreal like that, Quebec like that, and I was able to pull him back. It's a nothing thing in the whole scheme of things, but within my own mind, to be able to do that move inside, 500 metres to go with such a high quality rider, to be able to race freely and to be able to do that in that point, I was really satisfied. That wasn't just the only point. It was just that the team was appreciative that I was still able to race as a teammate, not just purely be a one out and just disregard the team and only go for my own results. Of course, I was striving for that, but I was still respecting my role within the team. So there was a few elements going there. And, ultimately, that, like I said already, that did set me up for the final chapter of my career, which was such an important part of my life, I think, which set me on a new direction, which is sort of where I'm at now, this next chapter. What I want to ask you about now is a little bit about yourself. Scott Barrow, doing all this, talking about all this, you're a cyclist yourself. Is there a bit of that you can relate to, myself even? Is there something from your sporting side that you can bring in? Is there some experiences that you bring to the table as well when you're speaking to your different clients? Or in your own mind, maybe? It's
sort of yes and no. In my role, the person who's doing my work, you have to be very careful not to bring your stuff onto the client prematurely, and you have to be careful to not sort of see the client through your eyes. You got to see the client through their eyes, because otherwise I'm going to bring your stuff in. And if I make, for example, if you say I want to win a race, and I just go, do this, and you're like, well, that's not going to work, because you know what's going to work. You're the expert in your life. But because I have my own physical sporting background, when you say, when you're sort of expressing emotions or frustrations or concerns, I can equate that to my own level, which hasn't been as high as your level, certainly not in cycling at all, but I can equate it. So I guess I am sort of, I'm using that, my own experience, to help me be empathetic to you, to understand it and really know what is it like, with what you're saying within the last year at Green Edge, like you are navigating the dual functions of trying to get some results for yourself to open that part up and show others that you've got something to offer, and also still not you use the words, not the dog the team. You didn't want to dog the team and not do your team role. So navigating that tricky balance, that was an important thing. So when you're saying how hard that is and tricky that is and the complexity, I'm definitely sort of at times, matching that up with my own tricky experiences. But certainly at the same time, I'm also trained to really get inside your shoes and your world and accept that and not judge you. And not judge you according to what my experience has been and what I know, because the way you live and are is completely different the way I am. How could I sort of just go, oh, well, this is all you need to do, Mitch? Like, how many times have you been given good advice and you haven't done it or it doesn't work? Because people don't know you. So I guess yes and no. It does help me especially with the empathy about the trials and tribulations of, trying to get the best out of yourself.
Well, how do you cope? Like you're hearing these different stories, these hard moments. How do you separate not taking that stuff on board emotionally? I'm only talking about my race now, so it might be easy just to get rid of that. But you got to become invested in well, maybe you don't. Maybe that's the trick. You don't have to become invested in the client, but I would find it difficult not to become emotionally invested in the client. Come home, bring some of this emotion home. Whether you talk about it or not, your wife and your family are going to feel that you've just had a lot put on you. How do you cope?
Yeah, so I want to say that if you look at coaching, there's almost, you could view it as two different ways of coaching. One way is where you are invested in the end result as much as the athlete. That means you care and you're getting passionate, and if you get disappointed if it works well or great, that's good. But at that point, I think you're not at your most powerful as a coach to serve the athlete. So I care about you and how I can help you. You care about your results that you get from the work with me. So the best way I can serve you is to focus on what do you need from me. What's within my control that I can do that helps you, that allows you to go and get those results, right? So while I loved cherry on top of the icing, like you said, icing on the cake, while I would love to see you get a great result in the race, if it doesn't happen, that's irrelevant to me, because I'm still back in, okay, well, now what do I need to do to help Mitch again? So there's almost like a division or a separation between the results that you're striving for and what my role is and what I can control, because I can't make you get that result. So what I'm getting at is, because of that way of approaching it, going, okay, your job is to get the results, my job is to help you get the results. My job is not to guarantee the results, my job is to serve you. So because of that, the stress levels on me, like it's less, because I'm not as attached to that result. I am attached to serving you really well.
Has it been tricky to navigate that? Because I can imagine in the beginning you've gone too much.
Yeah.
But also sometimes you've gone, I'm going to pull back, and the client hasn't engaged enough. And you're like, I've been too removed from this person. Is it difficult, or is every case different, or you've found a really good way of doing it?
It can be tricky for sure. In the early days when I was sort of coaching, so I went from the physical preparation and sports science and all that, and I was working with some football people. So I had a lot of expertise in their field. So that's good. I could tell them that expertise, but the power of what I had to offer was more asking them and see what they think that they could come up with, empowers them, right? Gives them that next level of performance. But there was a situation with you in our journey, whereas midway through our time together, working together, you found out from, it was at Orica Green Edge then, that they were called, that you weren't going to get a new contract. And at that point, you went missing, you went out of communications with me. Normally in my role, the approach is the client's an adult, they will contact you when they're ready, and that sort of thing. So leave it with them, sort of thing. But it just kept nagging at me, and I thought, oh no, at least I've got to check in with him and see whether. So I reached out then, and I wanted to make sure that, because you were saying, well, is there any point in doing this? Because I don't even know if I'm going to be racing next year. So is there any point in working on this performance element?
I do remember that.
Yeah.
Now, yeah.
And I said, well, but the work I do can also help work with you as a person and what you're going to and navigating this situation. So regardless, at the end of the season, I don't know if I said this, but I remember thinking, like you said, at the very least, at the end of this season, from this point onwards, you look back and go, well, at least I made the most of that, rather than wallowing in misery for the rest of the half year. It's a fine line, but you can step in, but I guess the approach that I use, it's like asking for permission. Mitch, do you mind if I say something that's outside what we've been discussing? Yeah, sure. Or, Mitch, do you mind if I check in on where we see we're at with this working relationship? So that sort of thing. Or really, it also can be the contracting that goes on between the coach and the athlete at the start. What do you want from me? You know, what does that look like? What I need to do with my clients is I need to say to them, hey, I've got to tell you that I'm not an expert in these things that you'll want to work on. I help you with the process. So I might have some things that I can offer up that put into conversation, but ultimately it's about helping you connect fully to your own full potential and working out how you're going to go about it. So part of it is setting those expectations at the start too. Do I get tangled up? Not so much. Early days, a little bit.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it sounds like to me, hey, I'm just going to allow you to see all the tools you've got in your body or in your own mind. I'm not going to put tools in there. I'm not going to miraculously build all this stuff in you. You've got it all there. I'm just going to help you open the doors to let you realise what you've got to do it to win the race.
It's spot on. Does that mean I've got nothing of value that I could add in? No, it doesn't mean that. But if we want you to perform, we want to do that as easily and as efficiently as possible. So if it means you can tap into something you've already got in you or that you've already used or already know, that's the way, because you want to do it. You don't want to have to do all this thinking work and learning work to be able to get the performance. So I want to see what you've got. And then if there's nothing there, and I check with you, hey, Mitch, it looks like there's not. How do you feel about your options you've got? And you go, well, no, I don't think any of this is going to work. And then I might say, well, Mitch, do you mind if I suggest something? Because there's something that I've got that I wonder if it might be helpful. So you're definitely trying to help them connect to what they've already got that's around them. And sometimes that might be other staff members, other support coaches, other support people. And then sometimes there might be something like there might be a model or a way of thinking or a story that you might add in. And the key is, though, that at that point, I'm not expecting you to take it on. I'm just offering it up. And if it resonates with you and it works for you, great. If not, it drops the form. We go again and we work it out. So that's about the craft and the way of working.
Do you look for people yourself to then go, okay, look, people are coming to you for help. Do you go to other people to help you?
Yes, I do. So I've got a lot of my peers and always working on the craft. And I also I work with a person, another coach, myself, on and off the last 4 or 5 years. You know, I was talking before about being interested in the craft and how good you can be as a coach and all that. I have a belief that I don't think you can be as good a coach as you can be if you're not being coached yourself as well. I just think you lose that empathy, you lose that understanding of what it's like to be coached. Doesn't mean you have to be coached, but at various times you need to be led and you need to sort of put yourself in the shoes of a learner, because it's a vulnerable position at times, isn't it? It's to recognise, like, I'm trying my hardest and I've done really well, but I'm all out of answers now, you know, and sometimes that admission might be frightening for some people, but it's the truth and it's the way forward.
Do you walk away sometimes and, you know, you've got success stories and you've also got, I guess, failures in a way, whether the client realises it or not, you go, this didn't happen. I don't know why. Is that hard to take on?
It does happen. It happened recently with a client, and the way we were working together, he was sort of, he brought it up maybe 2/3 through our working relationship, and he said, I want to check in with how engaged you are. He was wondering or feeling like I might have been fully engaged in the work that we were doing together. I was, but that's how he felt, and we went back and forth to try and clarify it, and there were some certain ways of working that I was doing. I think it was just not quite gelling, and then I guess, so at that point, I'm looking to see what I can do differently. Tell me what I can do differently. You know, all right, okay, how does this sound? But then sometimes it's like with this client, they just didn't think it was going to work. It wasn't going to work well enough. So there's almost like a mismatch. So sometimes as a coach, you do everything right or you do your best and it's still not right for that person because it's just not a connection, or something goes wrong unintentionally. So yeah, that does happen.
How does it make you feel?
Yeah, good question. Early days, and look, that one I just told you about, I thought about that on and off for a few weeks. Like, could I have done differently? You know, there's a deep learning. You know, you learn more from your failures, your so-called failures. Early days, it made me feel embarrassed and I'm humiliated, and I was worried about what that client might have thought of me. Nowadays, I'm a bit more mature now. I am a little bit sorry that it didn't work out. I am sorry for anything that I could have done differently for them that would have worked better, that maybe they communicated me that I didn't quite pick up on. But then it's like more philosophical. It's like, you know what? I did do my best. I wasn't arrogant. I wasn't evil. I wasn't manipulative. I did do my best. It wasn't good enough. Perhaps there was also some communication stuff from the other side of the equation that might have contributed as well. But in the end, you can't be great with everyone. It's just the way it is. The main thing at that point is I want that client, for example, they say, well, I worked with Scott. It didn't work out for me, but they know that I didn't disrespect them. I didn't treat them badly, you know. So at the very least they go, well, it didn't work, but I can see why he doesn't mean he's not a good coach. You know what I mean? That's what I want from me personally. It's very philosophical, I suppose.
From your little bit of knowledge of, you know, your time working with me and your understanding of the pro world and even just sports in general, look, I've got no other real knowledge on what happens in AFL teams or soccer teams or whatever other teams, but I can definitely speak on the behalf of cycling, is that, again, this is something I feel like we do. We sharpen the knife so sharp physically, but mentally we leave it a little bit blunt. I feel like there's much more room for more people like yourself or, you know, sports psychologists or whatever it is in this field in the professional sport, especially cycling, is needed. Why do you think we're not seeing that, and why is it not much more highly regarded?
Yeah, I two things that jumped into my mind. One, sports psychology is still connected to psychology, which originated out of dysfunction, right? So you back in the days, you know, back in the 1800s, you went to a psychologist when something was wrong with you, you know what I mean? You might have been put in a mental house or whatever. So it's still got this connotation that there's something wrong and therefore there's something to be shameful about. Even at sports psychology. It's shifting. Those in the know, they don't view it like that. So I wonder if that's still playing out. And then the other thing is when you go to a coach and the bulk of what they do with you, I'm assuming this is how I'm reading high-level coaching and coaching and cycling in general, the bulk of what they do with you is a training program. It's not actually a training program, it's a physical training program. So it's reps and sets, right? So you're doing the physical part of your development. That's good because you sort of know what to expect. You know, your levels are going to go up, and now with bloody everyone's got a power meter, so it's even better. My level's here, now I can go here, boom, I've got progress, I can stay in the bunch for longer, blah, 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 blah. So it's sort of obvious what to expect and you can see the improvement. But with this, you imagine me trying to sell to you, hey, Mitch, I help people get the most out of them. And you say, what are you doing? I go, well, I don't even know what we're going to do, Mitch. We'll have to explore that together. And you're like, I'm not buying that. So I think that's a part of it. Like because it can go anywhere. It can go anywhere. It's hard for sometimes people to sort of understand what they're going to get from it.
Yeah, we need power meters for the mind, do we?
Yeah. Do we really want to stuff up cycling even more? No, I like power meters, actually. Too much is bad. But yeah, so I wonder if it's those sort of things. It's not as obvious of a thing that the buyer knows what they're going to get. And I do still reckon there's still that taboo of, you know, are you seen a sports side? Oh, yeah, like, can't you do it yourself? You know, are you weak? In actual fact, it's the opposite. In actual fact, in my observation, in the world, the people who do the most amazing things, whatever that is, for your level, they are the ones who actually tap into the most people around them. Like the Roger Federer, they are drawing on people all the time. To use one example, right? They're drawing on people all the time. They're not doing it alone because, why is that? Because they're stretching themselves. They want to be amazing. They want it to be great. They want, and they know that having a person going to help them, the chances of success, but also maybe getting there a little easier and saving time and money and efficiency.
What advice can you give now to people out there listening, the every Joe Blow who's out there riding, the weekend warrior, or even just someone who maybe doesn't ride, or even just the young aspiring pro or the old pro like me? Because, like you said, it was a really great tool. It wasn't tangible, my result. You could argue that. My case is a great case because at the end of it, there was
I wanted you to win Paris-Roubaix and you said, I'm not sure if that's the right goal.
Yeah.
So we wanted that and you didn't get it. But anyway, you tried.
That's right. You know, and that's the thing. Like people, like you said, well, what's the advice to take out of this? Because, you know, if there's no set result, you know, why am I going to go out and do this? Why are you going to go and want to get
Why would you
help?
bother?
Yeah, why would you bother?
Yeah, so I guess it's some of the stuff I've touched on. One, you might be setting yourself a target that's much more ambitious than before. Like, I want to, say you're a club level rider now and you're 16 years of age, just saying, I'd love to get to the World Tour. That's a stretch, right? So you might want to help you navigate that. And even it might only just be a few conversations. What you're doing might not be working, or you're wondering, like, I don't think it's working, but it's taking a lot of effort and energy. It's those sorts of things. When you're not satisfied with the way it is, or you're not sure the best way forward, that's sort of why you would bother. Usually, ultimately, it's problem based. It's like, I'm not sure how to do it, or what I'm doing is not working, or now I haven't got a team and I don't know how to go about it. Those sorts of things. So yeah, I think it's about when you really want something, but you think doing it on your own is either not the best way or not likely to be successful. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So when you first start training with a coach, you go, geez, and start doing some sessions or whatever and some assessments, you go, geez, I didn't know I had those gaps in my physicality on the bike.
Yeah.
I didn't know I had those gaps. So you become aware by working with someone. It's the same thing with this. You mightn't necessarily work with someone forever and ongoingly, but you can maybe come and go, and you can at least explore some things and find a bit about yourself and see, this is actually where I'm at. You can do a version of an assessment too. So that can be very empowering as well. It doesn't mean you might work with someone forever, but at least you can sort of get someone else's take on you.
Yeah. What do you think's the most fulfilling thing for you? Why do you keep coming back and doing this? Because it's challenging, and sometimes it can be, I guess, maybe not so fulfilling, or, maybe not fulfilling is not the right word, or, a happy ending is probably the right word. But for you, what's the bit that sort of gives you that spark and you're like, this is something that I really just can keep sinking my teeth into and keep growing with? What do you love about it?
Yeah, a few years ago I did this reflection, and I learnt about intrinsic motivation, and intrinsic motivation being not I'm going to go to the gym because I get health benefits. That's not actually purely intrinsic. Intrinsic motivation is when you're motivated to do something for the joy of doing it. Say you're playing with your kids, just throwing a ball with them. That's fine. You're not doing it necessarily because it's good for them or whatever. You're doing it because it's fun, right? I coach and physically active. The main reason because I love being physically active just for itself. And now, of course, I layer other things on top of it, like getting fitness or performance or all those social benefits or whatever. So anyway, one of the things I love doing is learning. And so being a coach helps me stay in a learning space. So that's what I love. I do love helping people. And the other thing I love is that I love the fact that there's always a way forward. There's always a way. You don't necessarily, it doesn't mean you're always going to get everything you want, but there's always a way forward. And that way ultimately is learning and hopefully turning that learning into powerful results that you want. So why do I do it? Yeah, I love it because it helps people, it helps the world, and it's also a good vehicle for myself.
Mate,
you're looking at me like you believe me, which is good.
Well, mate, it's been great to chat. Thanks for that.
Mate. Sorry if I was a bit long-winded on some of my answers.
No, we went around in circles and up and down, and everyone knows all my problems as well now. So.
Well, thanks for having me, mate. Great.
Awesome.
And hey, can I just say, the episodes I've loved, and people are going to go, oh, yeah, that was good and that was shit. I loved the Matt Heyman one that you did, because you were in bloody hospital and all that, so that was good. The Scott McGrory winning the gold medal when his son was dying, tragic, but just amazing. Love the Sven Tuft stuff. What a bloke that guy seems to be. But then the one that got me was the Giro TTT.
Yeah, Triple T.
That episode where you interviewed, that was epic. Epic. That was unbelievable. That was a brilliant listen. And then the bit where you said Sven came over the top and he came to the front towards the end and he said, I'm bringing this home. Yeah. Don't worry, I'm bringing it home. And I was like, holy shit. So he said, the figures was, he said in that last 90 seconds, I think it was like 620 watts.
Something like that, yeah.
So I asked a mate of mine who you might know, Tommy Nankervis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I just went to him a few weeks later or whatever. I go, how long could you hold 620 watts for? And you know what he said?
What?
What's on the end of it? And
that's the key.
That is the mind coming in. The mind drives the body. What's on the end of it? And I thought to myself, there's a guy who knows what it takes, what's involved. So, yeah. Anyway, closing story. But I just wanted to share those episodes. Well, look, a lot of yours, it's all great, but I love those ones particularly. Because I'm Australian, so I've got Australian bias.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, mate.
Well, what did you think of that one, guys? Scott Barrow, a great guy to talk to. As you can see, very down to earth, but he has a really good way and knack of just asking those right questions. And especially for me, back in 2017, a huge help for me at that moment in my career to make me understand what I needed or wanted from the rest of my career. And it changed me to today. It set me on a new path. I'm very thankful for that. And I'm very thankful for the friendship that we have. And of course, for him and being so open and honest on this podcast. Like I mentioned in the middle of the podcast, super, super exciting. The Life in the Peloton beer is coming. Can you believe it? Keep your eyes open for that. If you haven't registered and you're really interested, get across and check out the Granite Classic. That will be happening on the 29th of April. You've got a couple of weeks to do that. Last minute entry. Love to see you up there in person. I'll be there running the evening, Saturday night, the dinner for the Granite Legends. So come across and check that out as well. Lots of thanks to go out to Rapha, who is supporting the podcast, of course, Will Jones, who puts the episode together, Meg behind the scenes, but of course, you guys for listening. I love hearing your feedback, and I hope you enjoyed those mountain bike episodes, and now this episode, some great episodes coming up too. Guys, I hope to see you up in Beechworth, but if not, you'll hear from me on the podcast in a few weeks' time. Until then, guys, cheers. The music in this episode was composed by Pete Shelley. Cheers, mate.